Okay, so I had the case Zoll versus the Eastern Allamakee Community School District. I am probably pronouncing that wrong, but that's what you get. Anyway, so it was heard by the United States Court of Appeals in the Eighth Circuit in 1978, and it deals directly with the idea of reduction in force, which is, just to define that at the beginning, reduction in force means that as you get less students in the school, that you obviously need less teachers and can only afford X amount of teachers, so therefore some teachers are going to have to be let go, right? And so what happened is you had a teacher, Mrs. Zoll, and she had taught in this school district for 15 years. She had been an educator for 29 years in all, and so she was a seasoned educator. And she even got promoted to be the elementary school principal of the Eastern Allamakee Community School District, but then she resigned after 2 years and she devoted her time to full-time teaching. Then, in the beginning of the 73-74 school year, she decided to essentially criticize her principal, the school superintendent, and the school board members in the local newspaper through a letter. I think it was 2 letters to the editor. So after she had done this, the school principal called her in, and she criticized them, I guess, for the lack of academic excellence. She implied that they were more concerned with athletics than they were with the academic side of school. So anyway, she got called in by her new principal, the one that had taken her place, and he essentially said that he was disappointed, and he chastised her and said that, he shouldn't know, and the superintendent knew that he was going to have that meeting with her. Either way, the previous to this, or I guess it was in December of 74, it says that the school board followed the suggestion of the Iowa Department of Public Instruction in adopting a contingency plan for staff reduction in the event of a decline in enrollment. So the idea was, if there were decline in enrollment, what would you do? Like, adopt a contingency plan. So the plan that they adopted was there'd be a 100-point system. 40 of the points would be based off of objective merit, based off of several things, and then the rest would come from the principal, superintendent, and school board could each do 20 points of more subjective observations on the teacher. So what happened is there were 3 elementary school teachers, and of those 3, Mrs. Zoll got the highest score in the objective. She got all 40 points, whereas the others only got they got very few of those points. I believe the one, when it came to the objective side of it, and just to be fair, the objective side was based somewhat off of like longevity, a few things like that. But anyway, experience. Mrs. Okerlund, one of the competing first grade teachers, scored like 4.5 points, and Mrs. Meyer scored 16. So like big differences. And yet the overall scores were Mrs. Zoll scored 57, Okerlund 62.5, and Meyer 72. So obviously it came out of the subjective side of things. So Mrs. Zoll was insisting that she got let go for exercising her First Amendment rights, rather than just the force and reduction. This is kind of driven home by the fact that after being in Iowa, after being released for forced reduction, job loss or whatever, the teacher can be like considered and rehired within the next 3 years. Within those next 3 years, there were several positions that opened. She applied for all of them, didn't get any of them. They hired new teachers instead. And so it was, in her opinion, pretty obvious that she had been chosen not to be there because of the letters that she had published, and not because of the forced reduction. So, or reduction in force, I guess. Either way, she filed the lawsuit and everything, and like it pretty much came down to the fact that there were a couple key witnesses and a few things like that that actually made it obvious that they had made their decision before they even had their school board meeting. So they had decided it in the executive portion of the school board meeting. But the court ended up, they affirmed parts of the ruling, and then they vacated and remanded other parts of the ruling. And it gets kind of complicated, but it deals it's talking about the monetary things, like who was paying for what, things like that. Those are some of the parts they remanded and vacated. The interesting thing, though, is in the case notes, to go a little bit beyond, it talks about how that with the reduction in force policy, that there's something called bumping. And bumping is where a tenured teacher can bump if they're so if I, for instance, let's say I'm a tenured teacher, I can teach English and driver's ed and student council, and I'm accredited, but I'm accredited in all these areas. And so if there's a non-tenured teacher that is teaching, let's say, driver's ed, and right now I teach English, but they're cutting down one of the English positions, then technically I should be able to bump into here and bump that non-accredited, that non-tenured teacher out, even though we're both accredited because I have tenure. So bumping is a really fascinating thing. I thought, I really enjoyed reading about it. And then it just talks a little bit more about the just cause and having almost going back to the due process cases. And I believe that is it. So enjoy.